All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Wednesday morning, and we're roaming the streets of Orange County, California. And what's going on right now is another day where the sleeping gas, ladies and gentlemen, of the media and Donald Trump and the Hollywood circus that's taking place over his nominee and his speech at the UN and his FCC chairman are all dovetailing into the ultimate nightmare for humanity. You know, I get a lot of flack for criticizing Donald Trump because he's been supposedly through a lot in his presidency. No, he's been through a lot in his business dealings. He's had more bankruptcy filings than I had girlfriends in college. Look, folks, this guy is a big-time player, and they've rolled out the biggest circus act in American history because they're about to pull off the heist of the century on the American people. The United States has never been a nation of people who supported unjustified wars of aggression against innocent people. The United States has always been a nation of self-reliant, rugged individualists that want to be left alone to take care of their families and live their lives out in the manner in which is consistent with what God put us here to do, and that is to have children and to work the land and to be productive. And for centuries, the heart of the American people have been rooted in those principles and biblical, godly principles, Christian principles. Well, we're now being shown how our phony messiah, Mr. Donald Trump, and his cohorts and his appointees like to spend their evenings, apparently, at these wild parties. Look, folks, these people are no different than anybody else in Washington, D.C. I know about these parties. I've been to some of these parties where it's wild times, everybody's drunk. I've never been at a party where people were being drugged or raped, but I've been to parties where women had totally lost control of all their faculties, and so had a lot of the men. And I'm a low-level taxpayer, folks. I'm a man of means. I'm not an extremely wealthy individual, so I've never been into some of these real ragers, so to speak. But I can tell you that what goes on in Hollywood and Pedowood and Washington, D.C. Did you know Washington, D.C. has the most alcoholics per capita than anywhere else in the world, ladies and gentlemen? And Washington, D.C. is full of the most vile, reprobate people you would ever meet in your life. It's a den of evil. But it's being fueled and fanned as these flames are sweeping across the mantles of everyone's fireplace as they look at the jumbotrons in their living room as this saga plays out over this appointee. And Donald Trump is making statements in front of the UN that is going right over most people's heads. You see, what is happening is Donald Trump is assigning a vicarious existence to Iran that is actually being lived out by his handlers, ladies and gentlemen. And the key words and the code words that he spoke yesterday indicate that we are going to war. Now, in the meantime, domestically, we're being faced with the FCC stepping on the gas with 5G. It was announced yesterday that they're not going to put up with what they call extortionist tactics of local municipalities and local governments over small cell sightings and costs that they are imposing on the carriers. So they've basically imposed a shot clock or a deadline limitation to where they can't play games. They got to ram this stuff through. Folks, domestically, war has been declared on us with a millimeter wave surveillance matrix that is doubling as the all-seeing eye of Lucifer, as well as the dream of eugenesis, because it's a kill grid and a control grid at the same time. And the Trump administration is directly responsible for the implementation and the rollout of these systems. Now, the Obama administration gave us ConnectEd and E-Rate, which weaponized all of the classrooms in the United States. And for years I fought against that and exposed that on the FullertonInformer.com and on this channel. And what we are left with now is every single school in the United States of America has a weaponized classroom in it. Because every school in the United States of America that is run by the government, and even private Christian schools, have put high-powered Wi-Fi access points in the classrooms, which are microwave transmitters, ladies and gentlemen, and they've placed microwave weaponry in the laps of the children. And I'm going to keep talking about this because as I'm driving to work right now, your children are having their reproductive rights stolen from them by Apple Computer Company, your child's teacher, your child's principal, your child's superintendent, and your school district's board of trustees, because they all know what they're involved in. Because for the better part of 5 years, I've attended almost all of the board meetings and spoke about these issues, presented information via email, leafleting cars, holding banners on the sidewalks in front of the school drop-offs, and of course attending council meetings and telling everybody what's being done to their children. And I went so far as to lay out the entire agenda on WiFiDangers.com and the FullertonInformer.com. But that's the legacy of the Obama administration. You know, you think everybody got their taxes raised and you know, we lost some businesses. Well, we're losing businesses because of the trade policies that were put in place decades ago, folks. It's been a slow process of attrition as jobs go overseas, and we import workers with the H-1B visas that take jobs that Americans would work for, but they'll get them for half price. So why wouldn't they? Just look at the IT departments of the large corporations. They don't speak English. English is their second language. Is there something wrong with this? Yes, there is. Because there are children that have gone through college with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt that can't find a job, because we've got people that have taken those jobs for half the price. So these children with this tremendous tuition debt can't find work. So they have a mortgage while they live in their parents' basement playing video games, eating microwaved Hot Pockets. Meanwhile, these subcontractors of the wireless companies are walking around in these vests that you buy at Home Depot and inspecting all the poles for deployment of the 5G kill grid that Trump has commissioned. Now, 5G originated in Israel. It was developed in Israel, folks. And Israel is not rolling out 5G, at least until after 2025, but yet it's slated to come to the United States now and here. You have to wonder why the Trump administration is putting a weapons grid and a control grid in his country when Israel won't put it in their own and they invented it. You have to wonder why Donald Trump is allowing his FCC to try to stomp all over local control over placement and siting of this weapons grid. And you have to wonder why Donald Trump, the bankruptcy whore of New York real estate, has set aside $80 billion for the deployment of this weaponry in rural America, while the inventors of this weaponry and this matrix and this all-seeing eye of Lucifer, when it was made in Israel, and Israel's not deploying it in their country. This is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. And I have trade publications from the wireless industry that lay out the timetable of all the countries that are getting 5G. And this trade publication even has information and ads from DARPA in it. So this is not a comic book that I'm referring to, ladies and gentlemen. You have to wonder why we have Trump making statements in front of the UN, in front of the entire world, that places the blame for one country squarely in their face, when in fact it is the others that are responsible for what he's blaming them for. Trump is laying the groundwork for World War III. His handlers are the same ones that run the military-industrial complex. Trump is not in control of our country, folks. He's a puppet. He's the mouthpiece. And he's the one that puts the pencil to the paper. We have to realize that what is at stake here is your children, the future of this nation. You see, we cannot continue to spend trillions and trillions of dollars on endless wars. Do you know we spent $7 trillion since 9/11 on the war on terror? Do you know the war on terrorism? The war on terror, that was a phrase coined in, I believe, 1979 by Bibi Netanyahu. In 1979, a group called Supertramp came out with an album called Breakfast in America. And if you take the cover of that album and you flip it, in other words, you turn it over, you'll see 9/11 on the cover with the towers. You see, these plans are laid decades in advance, and the euphemisms and the mantras are subliminally planted in the media and in our minds to accept an ongoing agenda that involves ritual blood sacrifice of our men and women in the fields of battle that have been predicated on abject lies. You see, George Bush went to war in Iraq and attacked a sovereign nation because he mistakenly thought that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And after millions of people were murdered in that country, and after that country was bombed back to the Stone Age, and hundreds of thousands of our soldiers were killed and wounded, and their lives literally destroyed as they fill the gutters with homelessness and mental illness and medical conditions like the Gulf War illness from all the medical experimentation that took place on our soldiers as they were injected with all kinds of biological agents and watched as these experiments were run on our men and women. Nothing's changed, ladies and gentlemen. The same type of ritual sacrifice is still underway. And as a matter of fact, a much larger one is being planned with World War III. And it is coming. And I don't like to talk about this. I don't like to bring these things up. I would just like to raise my family. I would just like to love my children and teach my children about Jesus Christ and grow my garden and go fishing and go on vacation and pay my taxes and be a good citizen that votes and gets involved in local issues and tries to make my world a better place to live in. But you see, folks, from every angle, wars being waged against us. And I'll give you some examples. I live in Fullerton, California. And I have a modest home. And I have some fruit trees. And I have a vegetable garden. I have some grapevines. And since I was a child, I would rely on the rains to come and water the trees and the garden in the winter. Well, they've stopped the rains with the weather modification, with all the chemical spraying and all of the electromagnetic equipment they use to hit these metallic nanocompounds they spray on us before the storms get here. So it doesn't rain here, and it rains 5 times as much where some of you are. And that's why half the country's underwater in the winter, and we're drying out like the Sahara Desert. When in fact, we used to get 20 inches of rain in California on a regular basis, spread out through the fall and the winter and the spring. And it worked out great, and every year we had apricots, peaches, and plums. And the broccoli would grow, the cauliflower would grow, the cabbage would grow in the winter. The tomatoes would grow great in the summer because we didn't have to rely on imported water. We had runoff from the mountains at the Prado Dam, and it filled the basin, and we got the well water from the ground. But then they started importing it because they said we don't have enough, so all this salt is building up in the water, and it's affecting the alkalinity of the soil and the soil chemistry and the microbial content of the soil. The plants aren't growing like they used to. We're not allowed to water as much because they've made water tremendously expensive, and they add all these bromine and chloramine and halide compounds that further destroy the soil chemistry and the soil microbe content, and thus the health of the plants, the immune system of the plants. And so the yields are down even though I have good soil. So I had to take it a step further and put up a pretty good filtration system on my outdoor irrigation system. And it cost me about $1,000 to get a water filter for my garden, folks. Unbelievable. And it still doesn't get out the fluoride. It'll get out those compounds I've mentioned, but you know, I got to backwash the thing and use a ton of water to backwash the thing and dump that down the sewer. I mean, it's just, you know, growing up, they used to pull it out of the ground. They didn't bleach it or chlorinate it or brominate it. They just gave it to us, and the plants grew great. Well, we're under attack with the water, folks. And you know, I love citrus and oranges so much so that I've probably got about 15 different varieties of citrus on my property, and dozens of trees. And I love citrus. I even in some instances eat the peels of some of these. I have tangeloquats, tangerines, mineolas, and kumquats, and valencias, and navels, and there's just all these different varieties of citrus that I have. And lo and behold, the State Department of Agriculture wanted to have access to my backyard so they could do 2 things to my citrus trees, because they found an invasive insect in my area that was not carrying any disease, but it is a vector that carries a disease. So they wanted to get in my backyard and dig a trench around all my citrus trees and dump a pesticide around the roots so the tree would suck up all this pesticide, and when these insects came to feed on the leaves, it would kill the insects. And on top of that, they wanted to spray all my citrus leaves with another toxic pesticide so that it would kill whatever insects are on the trees. Now, hell no! You're not coming on my property! And the Department of Agriculture worker said, well, I'll just call the sheriff. And I said, you idiot, we don't have a sheriff. We have a municipal police department. Get off my property. Come back with a warrant and the cops and justification. Now, I did a little research, because since the Department of Agriculture sends out these low-level idiot minions that don't even know what kind of law enforcement apparatus exists in the city that they're trying to strong-arm me on, it turns out that they have literally thousands of traps, and they found these insects at 2 houses. And it was at the same house. And so their justification was to go to an entire area and poison the whole damn thing. You know what? That's just one example. So I protected my citrus trees for now. I haven't used an ounce of chemicals, pesticides, or fertilizers, or anything in my yard since I bought that house almost 20 years ago. And I'm telling you, You don't need to. You need to take care of your trees and they'll take care of you. But you know what? The government is at war with its people as Trump is trying to start World War III with Iran. Another example of how the government is at war with me at my local level is the Vector Control Board in Orange County seems to be hell-bent on spraying pesticides all over the entire county from the air. So much so that they actually tried to stage a St. Louis encephalitis outbreak, which is a mosquito-borne illness, and scaring everybody into accepting aerial spraying. And what I found after I did my research is that the only traps that were containing mosquitoes that tested positive for St. Louis encephalitis were found on Vector Control's own property in Garden Grove, California. And after publicizing that issue, they backed off of that. But now what is going on is we have been drenched with a new variety of mosquitoes that are not native to this area, and it hasn't rained for years. So these mosquitoes are obviously being dropped on us. And what is happening is these mosquitoes must be continually being dropped on us because there's nowhere for these mosquitoes to breed, yet they continue to show up and bite myself and my children and you and your children in Orange County. And so Vector Control is slowly working on developing the pretext right now, I believe, of being involved in releasing mosquitoes that are positive for Zika or dengue or some other insidious disease that these mosquitoes are known to carry as a pretext to spray the entire county with poison. And this is all going on while the city councils are making boilerplate agreements with the wireless industry to put 5G microcell weaponry on every light pole, every public right-of-way, every power pole in the city, because the government is at war with us. A few years ago, there was this staged measles outbreak at Disneyland, California. And the strain of measles that was present in this staged outbreak was a strain of measles that the MMR vaccine had never even been tested for efficacy against. And yet this staged outbreak that had no patient 1, no patient at ground 0, no trace origin, just this nebulous outbreak that was staged at the Tragic Kingdom, the most unhappiest place on earth if you're trapped in one of those tunnels under there, screaming for your mom. You heard me. Satanic Disneyland. They passed a law in California mandating vaccination for school entry. So the government, not only are they trying to spray my house, spray the root system to my citrus, they want to spray my entire property from the air and spray my entire property on foot. And now they want to inject my children with vaccines that have never been tested for impairment of fertility, mutagenic potential, or carcinogenic potential. So these children can sit in a classroom with weaponry deployed in it called microwave systems with infertility pads aimed at their abdomens with a slot antenna placed at the bottom by Apple to do the job, folks. In the meantime, they're trying to put these millimeter wave installations on all the telephone poles so they can look through your walls and listen to all your appliances and watch you through your television sets that got cameras on them. And they can turn on all of your Wi-Fi systems and go through the... Did you know that every electronic device manufactured for importation to the United States has a back door in it that DARPA and the military and the government has access to? The police department have things called Stingray. They run them off the cell towers. So they want to... After they want to spray from the air, spray from the ground, dig a trench around my trees and dump poison on the stumps of my trees. They want to spray my yard. They want to inject my kids. They want to irradiate my kids. They want to irradiate my entire family. And then they put these lights everywhere They get rid of these old high-pressure sodium street lights. You know, those nice orange lights that emit at around 2300 Kelvin. A nice orange glow that doesn't keep you awake at night. You know, you could drive home from work and still fall asleep. You can go for a walk at night and still go to bed after you go for your walk. No, they put these LED lights in that from a distance are about 4,000 to 5,000 degrees Kelvin, but as you get up close to them, the color temperature drops to about 3,000. And what does this do to the environment? Well, what does it do to you? They've even weaponized the lighting. Can't get a good night's sleep if you go for a walk. You can't get a good night's sleep if you go for a drive. They've weaponized the headlights. All the headlights are these bright white projector beams or these bright white 5,000 degree Kelvin lights. And when I want to go to the store and I want to try to get some produce because I can't get stuff to grow in my backyard because of what they've done to the soil with the water chemistry manipulation, I've got choices, ladies and gentlemen. And no matter where you live, you're going to have these problems unless you do something about it. Because we've got a president who's aiding and abetting everything I said. While he wants to start World War III with Iran, blaming them for a bunch of stuff they're not even doing. The biggest threat to the Middle East right now is nuclear Israel, ladies and gentlemen, not Iran. I repeat, the greatest threat to the Middle East right now is Israel's nuclear arsenal. Now, a lot of people don't want to talk about this, but I will, because I'm not one of those people that buys into this phony eschatology that makes me worship people that nailed him to the cross. I tell the truth, folks. And whether you like it or not, I'm going to keep telling the truth. We got a situation on our hands where they spray stuff from the skies, ladies and gentlemen, so it doesn't rain. We've also got a situation where they spray stuff from the skies, ladies and gentlemen, so they can get nanotechnology into our bloodstream. They've got this stuff in the food, they've got this stuff in the lotions and in the potions and everything else, and they need the 5G to run all these nanomachines that once they get in our body, they'll be able to work their dark magic on us. You ever heard of Morgellons, ladies and gentlemen? There are people that have been injected with piezoelectric compounds that are nanomachines, basically. They're these crystals that they have... You know, you got to look up things like piezoelectric compounds and the fullerenes, and there are all kinds of these devices at the nanometer level. They're so small, and they're so incredibly complex, and they're so capable of so much wickedness. And then we've got to come home from work, and for those of you who haven't figured this out yet, you need to shut your TVs off. But if you want to watch your televisions, that's weaponized. You know, the flicker rate of these smart TVs is absolutely off the charts. Did you know that years ago, you could freeze frame some of the analog broadcasts and you could see the subliminal images, like you could see the Baphomets and the ice cubes on the Scotch commercials, and you could see the swastika and the vampire incisions on the cadaver that was riding the mechanical bull in the Carl's Jr. Super Bowl commercial. I mean, the stuff is there, but now you can't pick it up. You're being programmed. There is all kinds of satanic bloodletting pornography being run in the background of a lot of Hollywood movies at a subliminal level. And all this stuff you're feeding your mind under this blue glow. Have you ever noticed the color temperature of the broadcast now is blue? The movies are really this eerie blue. Everything is this eerie blue. The video games are this eerie blue. It's all part of activating your subconscious and programming it with devices whose flicker rate manipulation and subliminal programming behind what you see is at such a high rate that the naked eye cannot detect it. And who's behind all this, folks? I will tell you who's behind all this. It's the same people that deny Jesus Christ, that think it's okay to lower the consensual age of sex with children, Tonight there's a board meeting for the Orange County Department of Education because our children are being attacked by the government. There are groups of people that want to indoctrinate our young boys and girls all the way down to kindergarten with sexual techniques that involve fisting and rimming and anal sex and sex stands and sex toys, as they dumb them down and break their brains with Common Core so their parents can't help them with their homework, to disconnect the children from their parents. And now the sexual liberation of these children is actually setting the stage for pedophilia, because the ultimate goal of this lobby that wants to corrupt and pervert our children is to lower the age of consensual sex down to 10 or 12, folks. That is what they're into. And that is what we're facing. What has Donald Trump done about the forced vaccination law in the state of California and the fraud that went into preparing that and passing that? When the measles strain that was found at the Disneyland outbreak that was staged, I believe, is not even a strain that the MMR vaccine that's still in use today, that's mandated today, was even found to be effective against. It's unbelievable. You look at the hepatitis outbreak that took place in the homeless population in San Diego. That strain of hepatitis wasn't even native to the North American continent, folks, but it certainly ended up in the homeless population. And what was the outcome of that? Well, they got to spray everybody with chemicals. They got to spray the areas with chemicals. They got to inject everybody with the vaccine. You see how this works, folks? It's called problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem. They create enough chaos to get you to accept a solution that they come up with, and then they force the solution. And if you talk about anything that they don't like you talking about, they'll call you a hate monger, a conspiracy theorist, or a provocateur. That's right. That's right. So what do we do? Well, stop believing the lies and stop the Trump worship. Stop believing the lies and stop letting them weaponize your children's classrooms. Demand that they shut that stuff off or get your kids out of there. Stop accepting the poisoning of your property by the state and county level agriculture and vector control agencies under false pretenses and staged outbreaks that they're working on. You know, when I grew up in Garden Grove, my dad had a fig tree, and every year these were these green figs, and they were delicious. And they would be ripened by right around August, if I remember correctly, mid-August, right around the time some of the grapes would start coming in. And there were these fascinating bugs called a Japanese beetle. They were absolutely gorgeous. They'd fly around. They have this, if you've ever seen a Japanese beetle up close, it's this gorgeous metallic alien-looking spacecraft shell color. Amazing. And by the way, I don't believe in aliens, but I'm just throwing that at you, because it almost looks like something that is not of this world in terms of the color and the material that God has created on these beetles' wings and bodies. These bugs have been around since I was a little kid. Well, when I'm out and I see white trucks with strange logos on them, I'll pull up or I'll walk up to the driver and I'll say, "Hey, what are you doing? What's that chemical tank in the back? What are you doing?" And now they're testing and setting traps for the Japanese beetles in Southern California because they want to implement a pesticide spraying program to combat the Japanese beetles. Now, these Japanese beetles have been in this area for 50 years, as long as I've been here. And they've always been here, and there were plenty of figs on that tree to eat. But see, 50 years ago, this was an agricultural area. Agriculture is no longer here, folks. There are no agricultural operations in Southern California anymore. For the most part, it's all been urbanized. But yet, for some reason now, we've got somebody running around a glass house with a hammer trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist because it's part of the agenda to wage war against us. It's eugenics to spray us with more stuff. You see, apparently the wireless isn't sterilizing people fast enough. So now they've got to bring in other mechanisms. One of the things that really amazes me is the ability of God's creation to bounce back against the attacks of the devil. You know, whether it's what the government is doing to us, and we still continue to proliferate and have families, and we continue to resist it. Even some people are surviving these things without even realizing they're being attacked, but the day is coming where you're not going to be able to do that. Because once they aim everything at the same time at us, it's not going to be that easy to overcome. Look, folks, Jesus Christ is the way, and you need to pray for wisdom. And you need to pray for forgiveness for your sins and ask Him to forgive you, because we're going into a time where it's going to try your souls, folks. We're about to go to war on a total lie once again. And the people that brought us into the first war that we had, this war on terror, are about to bring us into the next one. And it would not surprise me if they've got something planned coming up here later on this year to do just that. To freak you out and get everybody scared, to accept the lie and to accept the reaction to the problem that they're going to propose as the solution. $7 trillion. Millions of people have been murdered. Countries destroyed, bombed back to the Stone Age over an abject lie, ladies and gentlemen, over the circumstances surrounding those trade centers. And here we are again, 17 years later, about to repeat history. You need to watch Trump's speech, and you need to read between the lines, because he's talking in a way that he means business, and so do his handlers, folks. You see, Trump has been bought and paid for multiple times. He's a real estate bankruptcy whore, folks. That's what he is. And he's been bailed out a bunch of times by dirty money. And believe me, he's got to pay him back, and he's doing it. I know some of you guys, oh, you love him because he gave you a tax cut. You know, you could take your money and go to Thailand and do what you do behind your wife's back. I know who you are. I know who you people are out there. I've seen you guys, you know, playing $1,000 hands at the blackjack table. I've seen you guys when your wife's not around. I know how you act. I know what you do with all that money you withheld from all your employees, how you underpaid everybody all these years, but you like your tax cut, right? I know how you operate. It's okay. You don't care what's happening to your grandchildren. You don't care, because the love of money is the root of all evil, and some people have given over to it. And a lot of people behind Trump are money lovers. And a lot of people behind Trump are brainwashed by these phony churches into thinking that he's some god or some anointed one. He's not anointed. Are you kidding me? Trump is the farthest thing from being anointed. What kind of Christian goes bankrupt all the time? What kind of Christian would do that? What kind of business dealings do you think that man has had? Do you think that he handles business from a biblical perspective? How do you walk out on your debts? Here we go again. Look, folks, you need to wake up. And I'll tell you another thing about Trump. I think there's a couple of them. And that thing about the mask, I don't think he's kidding about that. So, you know, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if some real kabuki theater really unveils itself and rolls itself out to really, really bend your mind. I think we're entering into a Twilight Zone period in this country. And I'll tell you right now, you need to have your They Live glasses on, and those glasses come through the knowledge and faith in Jesus Christ, ladies and gentlemen. Get out of these Babylonian whore churches that steal your money, that preach a false gospel, that preach a false eschatology, that do absolutely nothing to stop the evils and the attack and the war that's being waged against us and our children, folks. That's a fact. And get right with the one who paid it all, Jesus Christ, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back tonight, and God bless.